I didn't scream when I caught my husband cheating. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I locked the door. And in that moment, their future ended. Because what they didn't realize yet, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that I had already won. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or quietly replaced, then hit like, subscribe and stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about what happens when the wrong woman is pushed too far. My name is Naomi Caldwell, and for most of my adult life, I believed something very dangerous. I believed that if a life was quiet, it was safe. I was 37 years old, married for nearly a decade, living in a carefully planned neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. Nothing about my life was dramatic. That was the point. I thought drama was what happened to other people. People who rushed into love, ignored warning signs, or chased chaos and called it passion. I wasn't like that. I believed in patience. I believed in structure. I believed that if you did everything right, life would meet you halfway. That belief lasted until a Tuesday afternoon in early October. And it ended not with an argument, or a suspicion, or a confrontation, but with a sound. Running water. Before that day, my life looked exactly the way I had planned it. My husband, Ethan Caldwell, was 42. He worked in operations management for a logistics firm and had been working remotely for the past year. He liked routines the same way I did. Or at least I thought he did. We met in our mid-20s, bonded over ambition and mutual exhaustion, and built our relationship slowly. No whirlwind romance. No dramatic declarations. Just steady progression. Engagement. Marriage. House. We used to joke that our relationship was low maintenance, and I wore that label like a badge of honor. Low maintenance meant no drama. Low maintenance meant no jealousy. Low maintenance meant trust. Or so I thought. Our mornings followed a rhythm so consistent it felt choreographed. I woke up first. Made coffee. Opened the blinds in the kitchen just enough to let light spill across the counter. Ethan showered upstairs. When he came down, he kissed my cheek, grabbed his mug, and we stood together by the sink talking about nothing important. Work schedules. News headlines. Weekend errands. Sometimes silence. But comfortable silence. I believed silence meant contentment. The house itself was my pride. 2 stories. Neutral colors. A backyard just big enough for privacy without being overwhelming. I picked every detail. The couch, the light fixtures, the throw pillows Ethan claimed not to notice but definitely used. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that I had done life correctly. Across the street lived Rachel and Lucas Monroe. Married. 2 kids under 10. Busy. Friendly. Normal. Rachel and I became close quickly. We walked our dogs together. Shared recipes. Watched each other's houses when one of us traveled. She felt safe. The kind of person you trust without questioning why. Looking back now, that trust feels almost naive. But at the time, it felt earned. That Tuesday morning started like all the others. Except Ethan was distracted. Not dramatically. Just slightly off. He checked his phone more than usual. When a message came in, he angled the screen away from me, just a fraction. Not enough to seem suspicious. Just enough that I noticed. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled. Just work stuff, he said. I believed him. I always believed him. By late morning, I was already at the office, buried in emails and preparing for an afternoon meeting when I realized something that made my stomach drop. I had left an important folder at home. The kind of documents you can't recreate quickly. The kind that could derail a presentation. I stared at my screen, weighing my options. Reschedule and look unprepared, or run home quickly and fix it. Professional instinct 1. I told my supervisor I'd be back within the hour. The drive home took 12 minutes. It felt longer. Not because of traffic. Because of a feeling I couldn't name. Something sat heavy in my chest, like a sentence left unfinished. When I turned onto our street, everything looked the same. Same houses. Same parked cars. Same quiet. Until I noticed a vehicle in my driveway that didn't belong there. A gray sedan. Not mine. Not Ethan's. My brain immediately rushed to protect me. A contractor. A delivery. A neighbor mistake. I parked on the street instead of the driveway and walked toward the house, keys already in my hand. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not cold. Not tense. Empty. Ethan always played music while working. Always. I called his name softly from the hallway. No answer. That's when I heard it. Running water. Upstairs. From the primary bathroom. At first, my body didn't react. No racing heart. No panic. Just stillness. I stood there, keys still in my hand, listening. The water ran steadily. Unhurried. Comfortable. That detail mattered, though I didn't understand why yet. As I moved toward the staircase, small things registered. Shoes near the entryway that weren't mine. A faint unfamiliar scent layered over my clean house. Each step upstairs felt deliberate, like my body was moving ahead of my mind. Halfway down the hall, I heard voices. Low. Close. Intimate. And in that moment, something inside me slowed to a stop. I understood, before I reached the door, that whatever was behind it would divide my life into before and after. I stood there longer than I want to admit. Because once you see the truth, you can't unknow it. Then I pushed the door open. I did not see everything all at once. That is something people never talk about. Discovery doesn't arrive like a single, shattering image. It comes in fragments. Disconnected pieces your brain struggles to assemble because accepting them means surrendering the life you believed you were living. First, there was the steam. Warm, heavy, curling out into the hallway like the house itself was exhaling. Then the sound, water striking tile, steady and unbothered. And then skin. Not just Ethan's. Another body, too close, too familiar in the wrong way. For a brief moment, no longer than a heartbeat, neither of them noticed me. They were careless in that way people become when they believe they are safe inside a secret. Then the woman turned her head. Rachel. The recognition hit before the meaning did. My neighbor. My friend. The woman who drank coffee at my kitchen table. Her face changed instantly. Comfort collapsing into terror. Her eyes widened, lips parting like she might speak, or scream, or apologize. Ethan followed her gaze. And froze. He said my name. Softly. As if volume mattered. As if calling me back into existence might undo what I was seeing. But the woman I had been 10 seconds earlier was already gone. Something else had stepped in. Something colder. Clearer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask a single question. Instead, I heard my own voice, calm and unmistakably steady. Don't move. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in the tone that made Ethan stop immediately. One foot still braced against the tub, uncertain whether to step toward me or away. I backed out of the bathroom slowly, never breaking eye contact. When I reached the door, I closed it. Then I locked it. The click echoed down the hallway, sharp and final. What are you doing? Ethan shouted, panic already bleeding into his voice. Staying exactly where you are, I replied. You've done enough moving for today. For a moment, I rested my hand on the doorknob. I could hear water still running behind it. Murmured voices. Rushed. Frantic. But the strangest thing was this. I felt calm. Not peaceful. Not numb. Focused. As if my emotions had stepped aside to make room for something more useful. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady. That detail mattered to me. Because it told me I wasn't falling apart. I was adapting. That was when I noticed Ethan's phone. Face up on the nightstand. Exactly where he always placed it when he showered. 4 years, neither of us used passcodes. We called it trust. I picked it up. Unlocked it. And everything changed. At first, it looked like nothing. A few unread messages. Notifications. Then I opened the thread with Rachel. It wasn't a conversation. It was a history. Good morning texts filled with affection I hadn't heard in years. Inside jokes. Compliments. Planning. Dates disguised as errands. Schedules aligned with precision. She never comes home during lunch, Rachel had written. So predictable, Ethan replied, followed by a laughing emoji. The words didn't sting at first. They burned. Not because they were cruel, but because they were casual. I kept scrolling. Photos. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough to tell the truth without explanation. Selfies taken in my house. In my living room. In the guest bathroom. My spaces. My life. My stomach tightened, but my hands didn't shake. Not yet. Then I saw the messages that hollowed me out completely. They weren't just cheating. They were planning. Divorce strategies. Money. Timing. Ethan talking about moving assets. About waiting for the right moment, so I wouldn't overreact. Rachel responding eagerly. Talking about a future together. Talking about how her kids would adjust. Talking about freedom. Freedom. I sat there holding the phone, realizing something devastating and clarifying at the same time. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't weakness. It was calculation. The knocking on the bathroom door started then. Soft at first. Naomi, Ethan said. Please. We need to talk. I didn't respond. The knocking grew louder. Rachel's voice joined in. Higher pitched now, threaded with panic. I still didn't respond. Because the woman sitting on that bed was no longer shocked. She was informed. And information is power. I picked up my own phone. There was only one call to make. One person who deserved the truth as much as I did. Lucas Monroe answered on the second ring. Hey Naomi, he said. Everything okay? No, I replied. I need you to come to my house right now. There was a pause. Is Ethan okay? I closed my eyes briefly. No, Lucas, I said. He's not. I ended the call and set my phone down. Behind the locked door, the tone changed. The pleading became urgent. Then accusatory. Even trapped, they were turning on each other. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the quiet street. Nothing had changed out there. Birds. Cars passing. Normal life continuing. That was when I understood something deeply unsettling. Disaster doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, and waits for you to notice. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. I went downstairs and opened the door. Lucas stood there in work clothes, confusion written across his face. Naomi, he said. What's going on? I didn't ease into it. Rachel is upstairs, I said. She's in my bathroom. With Ethan. The words landed between us like something solid. Lucas stared at me, his mind visibly rejecting the sentence. With Ethan? He repeated. I nodded. I locked them in. He didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stood there, breathing slowly, like his body had forgotten how to function. Then he exhaled and ran a hand over his face. How long? He asked quietly. I handed him Ethan's phone. We sat side by side on the couch. The same couch where Rachel had once sat laughing, her legs tucked beneath her, telling me about her kids' school projects. Lucas scrolled. I watched his shoulders slump. Watched his jaw tighten. Watched the exact moment disbelief gave way to understanding. This has been going on for months, I said softly. Lucas stopped scrolling and stared at the floor. My kids, he murmured. How do I explain this to my kids? That was when the full weight of it settled in. This wasn't just about broken marriages. It was about families. Lives built on lies. We didn't do this, I said. They did. Lucas nodded slowly. Something in his expression shifted. Shock hardened into resolve. We sat there in silence for another minute. Then Lucas stood. It's time to hear what they have to say, he said. I rose beside him. For the first time since that afternoon began, I didn't feel alone. We didn't rush upstairs. Power doesn't hurry. The voices behind the bathroom door had changed again. No more pleading. Just quiet. The sound of two people realizing the story they were writing had reached its end. I opened the voice recorder on my phone. Lucas nodded. We both understood. I knocked once. Not hard. Just enough to be heard. You can speak now, I said. But choose your words carefully. Ethan's voice came first. Rushed. Unsteady. Naomi, please. This isn't what it looks like. We were just talking and things got out of hand. Rachel cut in immediately. That's not fair. You told me you were already done with the marriage. Lucas looked at me. I pressed record. So, I said calmly, this has been going on for a while? Silence. Then Ethan sighed. We didn't plan it like this, he said. We were going to tell you both. We were just waiting for the right time. The right time, Lucas repeated flatly. We didn't want anyone to get hurt, Ethan added. I felt something slow and steady ignite in my chest. How long? I asked. 6 months, Rachel whispered. 6 months of lies, I said, making sure every word was captured clearly. Behind the door, someone started crying. Regret finally found its voice. Too late. We stepped away. The truth was no longer hidden. It was documented. Permanent. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with quiet precision. I called my attorney. Facts only. Evidence. Timeline. Her response was immediate and focused. Lucas made his calls next. His lawyer, his sister, arrangements for the kids. Each decision felt like stitching a piece of my dignity back into place. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was directing. By the time the house fell silent again, the sun was already lowering in the sky. Lucas and I stood at the bottom of the stairs. Listening. No more voices now. Just the hum of a house holding its breath. It's time, I said. Lucas studied me. You sure? I nodded. I was. We walked upstairs together. I stood in front of the bathroom door and placed my hand on the knob. I remembered locking it earlier. That first instinctive act of self-protection. This wasn't that. This was something else. This was a decision. I unlocked the door. And stepped back. When the bathroom door opened, there was no dramatic rush forward. No shouting. No apologies spilling out all at once. Just two people stepping into the hallway like they had aged years in an hour. Ethan came out first. Wrapped in a towel, his shoulders slumped, his confidence stripped away along with his clothes. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but fundamentally. Like someone whose inner structure had collapsed. Rachel followed behind him, clutching herself tightly, her face pale, eyes red and unfocused. They stopped when they saw Lucas standing beside me. That was the moment everything finally landed. Rachel's breath hitched. Lucas didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply looked at her, not with rage, not with disbelief, but with something far worse. Clarity. Don't touch me, I said calmly when Ethan instinctively reached out. He froze mid-motion. I'm going to explain what happens next, I continued. And you're going to listen. My voice didn't waver. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. You're going to get dressed, I said, looking directly at Ethan. You're going to pack essentials only. Nothing else. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Rachel started to cry. Quietly at first, then harder. Lucas finally spoke. Rachel, he said evenly, you're coming home long enough to pack a bag. Then you're leaving. She looked at him like she didn't recognize him. The lawyers will handle everything else, he added. There was no argument. No negotiation. They had lost that privilege. They moved like people underwater. Slow. Disoriented. Every step echoed with the weight of consequences they had never imagined reaching this quickly. I turned away. Not because I couldn't look at them, but because I didn't need to. Their shame was no longer my responsibility. When the front door finally closed behind them, it didn't slam. It clicked. Soft. Ordinary. That sound marked the end of a life I had outgrown. Lucas and I stood in the living room for a long moment. surrounded by furniture that suddenly felt like artifacts from another version of ourselves. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. I searched for the answer. "I don't feel broken," I said slowly. "I feel awake." Lucas nodded. He understood. We hugged briefly, not as anything complicated, not as something inappropriate, but as two people who had survived the same rupture. Then he left to face his own night. His children. His explanations. His grief. I stayed. That night, I walked through my house room by room. I opened every window. Let the cold Oregon air move through the space. I stripped the bed and put the sheets in the wash. Not in anger. In reclamation. I erased physical traces of what had happened. Not to deny it, but to remind myself that this place belonged to me. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet in the right way. The days that followed were methodical. Legal. Clean. My attorney moved quickly. The evidence did the talking. Messages. Photos. Recorded admissions. Ethan's carefully planned exit strategy collapsed under scrutiny. The assets he thought he could quietly shift were exposed. The timeline he thought he controlled worked against him. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. Just paperwork. Consequences. Finality. What surprised me most was not the anger. It was how quickly it faded. Without Ethan, the constant low-level tension I had never consciously acknowledged disappeared. I slept deeply. I breathed fully. I noticed how much of my energy had been spent making myself easier to live with. Smaller. Quieter. More accommodating. Rachel and Ethan tried to reach out. Apologies came in waves. Long messages. Carefully worded remorse. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter. Because I was done. Closure, I learned, doesn't come from explanations. It comes from decisions. Lucas and I spoke occasionally. Practical conversations. Updates about legal timelines. His children were struggling. Mine would have been too, if we'd had any. That thought landed softly, without pain. Just understanding. Months passed. Seasons changed. I signed up for a writing class I'd postponed for years. Took a weekend trip alone. No itinerary, no explanations. I learned how it felt to move through the world without adjusting myself for someone else's comfort. That freedom was intoxicating in the quietest way. 2 years later, I ran into Ethan unexpectedly. A grocery store aisle. He looked tired. Older. Like someone who had spent a long time running from consequences and finally stopped. He apologized. I believed he meant it. And I realized something important. I didn't need it. Indifference, it turns out, is not cruelty. It's freedom. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled that day. If I wish I'd screamed, cried, thrown something. I don't. Because I didn't lose my dignity in my worst moment. I protected it. This story isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. About the moment a woman stops explaining her worth and starts enforcing it. Betrayal didn't define me. My response did. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible in your own life, if you're shrinking to keep the peace, hear this clearly. Your strength is already there. You don't need permission to claim it. Sometimes it takes a painful awakening to remember who you are. But that awakening can change everything. My marriage ended. My illusion shattered. But I gained something far more valuable than what I lost. I gained myself. And that is a life no one gets to take from me again.